Welcome to episode number 63 of the YXE Sports Podcast. The first podcast edition of April. Yep. Wray Morrison. It's so funny because last week we were doing this from the comfort of our own homes because there was so much snow on the ground.
And now there's no sign of snow.
Yeah. Fast forward 7 days and there's no snow on the ground. But Easter is behind us. The Easter Bunny was good to you.
Yes, and you. We got together. We were allowed, with the expanded bubble, we were allowed to spend a little time together on the weekend. So that was good. And had a great weekend. So
and like we said, the weather is absolutely fantastic. I'm in my shorts here in Saskatoon. So it's a great time to be out and about. Of course, we are live on the Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar Facebook page, the YXE Sports Podcast Facebook page, no YXE. And of course, wherever you get your audio version of this podcast, we are live there as well. Of course, there's the opportunity to win a Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar gift certificate. So all you have to do is comment on the live stream of tonight's show. And if that comment gets used, you'll be entered to win a $25 gift certificate courtesy of Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar. And we have a fantastic guest lined up today, all the way from Ontario. TSN Rod Smith joins us now. And Rod, thanks so much for taking some time here today. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be on with both of you. My question for you is, was the Easter Bunny good to you when you were a kid?
Oh, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Did your dad subject you to a few scavenger hunts, anything like that?
There was one or two. Yeah, he made me. Yeah, but no, the consistency of the Easter Bunny through the years has been very good, so I can't complain.
Yeah, there were no gifts hidden, but there was a scavenger hunt, which was really entertaining for me.
Yeah, he was heavily dependent on mom as well, right?
No, very much so. Very much so. You know how it works, Rod, for sure. So I didn't know this until you and I were texting back and forth earlier this week. But, you had been in Saskatoon for so many of the great youth sports football games that the U of S Husky played with Brian Towers. And I know you remember the great running backs like Rob Simchuk and those big offensive linemen, Scott Flory being one of them, of course, that used to open up holes for guys like Simchuk and whatnot. But I just want to take you back because I didn't know this till you texted me. You also spent some time in Saskatoon back in 1989 covering the Canada Summer Games. And in your great TSN career, I don't know if I recall that or not, but that was a terrific little nugget that you had for me.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought it up, Ray. It's one of the fondest memories that I have in broadcasting. It was a great assignment, and actually that one, most of my fondest memories, of course, over the years have been at TSN. That was with CBC Radio, and we had a crew covering it. I mean, I was assigned. We broke it up. If anyone's had a chance to cover a Canada Games, I mean, and for a young reporter, I mean, just looking for good stories, you really had to dig. You really had to do your own research, and it was just a great experience, and just true spirit of sport. Nobody's getting a big salary here. And it was Saskatoon was absolutely outstanding, and that was and I've enjoyed the city ever since. I called my first ever football game 6 years after that for TSN when I started doing football play-by-play, UBC and the Huskies. And so, but no, you're right. I mean, that was very early in my broadcasting career at CBC. As I said, I was there for a few years before going back to TSN, and great memories.
Well, we're hoping for two things when it comes to the Canadian Football League season in 2021. One, that it happens, and you know this because you and I have already had this conversation, that I think that there should be one guy at the microphone for a Grey Cup game, and I'm talking to him. And I know you probably can't comment on that much, but it's out there.
But I can say that I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
But I have, some respected colleagues still there, even after Chris Cuthbert. Chris left a sizable hole when he went over to Rogers, but that question hasn't really been addressed, and then there's no point in it until the issue of if and when, and hopefully we're talking about when the CFL will play in 2021. But I do appreciate it because it's an event that I've certainly loved and respected as long as I can remember. I mean,
absolutely,
in the 60s in Ottawa.
Yeah, for a guy in his mid-20s like myself, Rod, I kind of more so know you as the in-studio host for the CFL on TSN. Just take us through how exciting it is to either be behind the microphone at a CFL stadium every week or at the TSN studio in Scarborough, whether it be Friday Night Football or the Grey Cup or whatever. Just what is that like to be kind of the voice and one of the faces of CFL football here in Canada?
It's something I've taken really seriously, Matt, because of my past. and how much of a fan that I was growing up, and how much I've always respected the league. And they're two very different dynamics, hosting in studio as opposed to being there to do play-by-play, which is, and I've loved hosting. But the experience of doing play-by-play is like nothing else. It is the single greatest way to watch a sporting event. And if it's a sporting event that you love, like I do in the CFL, then you are so engaged, and you're engaged because you have to be. You have to follow, of course, every single play, talk about every single play, know what's going on out there, and telling a story is so important too. And I love both jobs. I really do. I would love to have the chance to do more play-by-play, put it that way. But I've the hosting now, I first did it actually in 1997, just for a year. And then I went out and did some play-by-play, and then I didn't come back to it after years of hosting SportsCentre until Dave Randorf left to go and call hockey for Rogers. And then I had a chance to come back in 2014. So 6 seasons, 14 through 19. And quite seriously, in any capacity, though, it'll just be so nice to get back in there again. But it's a treat. And if you're wondering, and you talk about your age, and I was about your age, and I'm sure your dad was too, getting started in this business. And there's so many neat things that, if you're naturally a sports fan, as we all are, it's pretty cool to be behind a microphone, in front of a camera, whatever, and be able to talk about sports for a living.
You battled in the trenches on the offensive line for Queens back during your college days, and that kind of led to where you are now.
Yeah,
look at that. There's a great picture behind you.
That was my rookie season with Queens. I had a couple of years there, and then I transferred and I went to Ryerson.
So where did this
1979?
So where did this love for football start? Was it ever since you were born type of thing? How did this love for football for Rob Smith evolve?
We played, we played tackle football in the yard. So if you're a bigger kid as I was, you had an advantage if you could catch the faster ones. I mean, so I don't know. I did play hockey. I was never as good at hockey. And by the time I was early in high school, my father made me choose because, once you got into really, high school football in September, and hockey season would really get going right around then, and morning practices and practices after school. And I think he was worried that my schoolwork would suffer. And the choice for me was fairly easy because I was better at football, and I did like football a little bit better. I love hockey and grew up on it. But in Ottawa then, if you remember the days, and Matt, you won't, but Rick, you will, when the CFL with 9 teams had 2 of them named Rough Riders.
Yep.
And we were the Eastern Rough Riders, 2 words, not 1. That was the distinction. I mean, it's funny explaining that to someone now because they couldn't get over it then, especially in, let's see if my memory serves, 1966, 69, and 76. Saskatchewan and Ottawa played in the Grey Cup.
That's right.
And I don't want to upset Saskatchewan fans who would remember, but 76 is one of my all-time highlights. Tommy Clements to Tony Gabriel with just seconds to go, under a minute to go at old CNE Stadium in Toronto to win the Grey Cup and break the hearts of Rider fans. But this Rider fan, Eastern Rider, was very happy. And I grew up, Ottawa was a football town then. It was before the Senators, long before the Senators came back into the NHL. And we had the 67s and a great franchise, but in terms of pro sports, it was a football town then. And that was part of the reason why I became so interested in football.
One of the great people, of course, in the game, as you know, Rod, is Tony Gabriel. And every time we had an opportunity to interview Tony Gabriel, we'd say, Tony, thanks for joining us. We still hate you for 76. You're right. And he'd laugh. And it was just such a memorable moment in CFL history. We talk about,
I'm just going to say, not to interrupt you, which I'm doing, Ray.
That's okay.
72. And I don't know how well you remember the 72 one. That was close. That one right down to a final field goal, Saskatchewan at Hamilton.
That's right. Yep.
And Tony Gabriel was with the Tiger Cats then, and he caught a number of key drives from Chuck Ely on what proved to be the winning drive, setting up an Ian Sunter field goal. So Gabriel really, 76, everyone remembers of our age, of our demographic. But yeah, you're right. Tony Gabriel, I could see if I was a Saskatchewan Rough Rider fan, I'd probably have a problem with him too.
Yeah, we had him deported a number of years ago, so it's just the way it is. And, I want to bring up that first picture. This is a great shot from back. I guess this would have been 13 years ago.
Oh,
Ron. There's you and I. Now, one of us has aged not so well. The guy that's looking a little pale on the left. You don't age at all. That's kind of troubling. exactly how you did. But, we were talking a little bit about memories
Wow.
Isn't that something? So that's 2007.
Okay.
And that's you and me discussing the firing of Roy Shivers.
Wow.
At the time. That's what that is. Just before the Eric Tillman, Kent Austin regime came in and won a Grey Cup in 2007. But I was telling Matt about the first.
A little different now.
For both of us. Yeah. At least you still have yours. It might be a little bit of a different tint. Mine's thinning. So that's a little bit of a challenge there.
It's not showing right now.
But I was telling Matt, one of the great things, one of the great thrills for me, because I was with TSN from 1998 to 2010. So there was a 13-year stint where I saw a lot of great things on the sidelines. You were actually doing play-by-play when Paul McCallum broke Dave Ridgway's team field goal record for the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
Right.
And it was one of the greatest calls I've ever heard. And then after I was on the field with Dave Ridgway, after he just saw his record go down. So that was a great moment you and I had shared. But I'll never forget the first time I was in your studio back in 99. I bumped into you and Pat Tabler in the hallway. Mm-hmm. And I just remember bumping into you for the first time and just how gracious and great both you and Pat were. The days when you did Baseball Tonight with Pat, which was another one of your great things that you've been able to do on the air. And
thanks.
Matt and I were kind of going over all the Olympic calls and all the great moments that you've had. And we're going to get into the XFL, CFL discussion in a bit. But outside of probably what you're best known for now, which is football, what do you have a moment or a call or something on air that happened that stands out in your mind in your career?
I am most proud of those Olympics, the 2010 in Vancouver and the chance. And I'm glad the Vancouver one came before the London one, which I can explain. But to be on Canadian soil and Canadian ice, if you will, I did long track speed skating, and it wasn't the first gold medal won by a Canadian in Canada. That came just a day or two earlier in freestyle skiing. But when Christine Nesbitt won the women's 1500, and getting to call that. And I remember planning and thinking, because she was a favorite, and what I would say, and yet it all seemed so spontaneous as well. And that meant a lot to me, and all the work that went into it for so many people, not just the amount of work that I had to put in for it to make sure that I was ready to go. And then it was just such a thrill to be a part of an Olympics in Canada. But then 2 years later, that's the hardest I've ever had to work in this business, and that was in London, because I was given the honor of calling the aquatic events, so swimming and diving and synchronized swimming later on. And each day was very, very long, very busy, but it was something I'll never forget. I can't imagine ever having an assignment, that involved that much detail and that much preparation again. Just because, unlike football for me, a lot of things in football I remember that I don't have to study that much. I mean, historically speaking, whereas I really had to learn a lot. I spent a year learning a lot about aquatic history and the Olympics, and it was so tiresome, and yet it was so wonderful. I was really satisfied at the end with the way it all went. And so those two Olympics in 10 and 12 in Vancouver and London are really career highlights. There are other ones the other ones more are sporting events that I've got to see, which was really a thrill, and to be a part of just working it. But those ones really stand out.
Rod Smith joins us on the YXE Sports Podcast, of course, from the comfy confines of Ontario. We are live at Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar, and don't forget that Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar is broadcasting every Saskatoon Blade game. They're just over halfway done. The WHL hub in Regina, food and drink specials for every single Saskatoon Blades hockey game, and they have them on the big TVs here at Wendell Clark. So come on down to Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar on the corner of Circle and Idlewild. Rod, your colleagues have done a fantastic job of reporting on the Vancouver Canucks COVID outbreak. Just to change to hockey a little bit. Unfortunately, I was prepping for the webcast. I didn't have an opportunity to watch SportsCentre today, but where do we kind of stand with the Vancouver Canucks outbreak, if there's any new developments there from what we heard on the weekend?
I was up on it on the weekend, Ray, but like you, I've been off today, and I was out.
Oh, okay.
So I can't give you the latest update on it, except the number keeps going up. I mean, we're well into double digits. What is it, 17 or 18, and then coaches? Yeah. And the initial the initial assessment by the NHL was that all of their games up until next Thursday would be postponed. I haven't seen how much further it is going to be now, but this is a situation. It's funny, not really funny. It's strange when you think about it that the North Division for a time looked like the least of the NHL's worries.
Yeah.
Because of Canada, the closed border and all the cases, the pandemic raging in the United States. But these last two cases with the Montreal Canadiens, which was bad enough, they had 4 games postponed. And now with the Canucks schedule, I really don't know how the NHL is going to be able to deal with this Vancouver situation and that Brazilian variant that's been so prominent in BC. And this is, it's not a complete shock giving sports leagues the fact that they have been trying to go ahead and press on and play, while this pandemic continues despite vaccinations. But it's still, even though it happens, I guess, you're both shocked and not shocked all at the same time, I guess.
Right, for sure. It was probably only a matter of time that it was going to hit the North Division. Like you said, we did see that with the Montreal Canadiens a few weeks ago and now the Vancouver Canucks. We'll move back to football. Of course, the big talk around the Canadian Football League, Rod, recently has been the potential CFL, XFL merger, collaboration, whatever you want to call it. Just your own personal opinion. Where do you see the two sides agreeing on something like that?
That's really tough, Matt. I really don't know. I mean, I know when I talked initially to Randy Ambrosi about it, and he was somewhat coyly saying we're talking about talking, and I think all of us believe and realize there's a lot more to it than that, and that's been going on longer than they would indicate right now. But I also don't know where it's going to lead. It's hard for me to imagine it only being a business association. So if they are indeed discussing a merger, it's also difficult to imagine a merger arrangement where there won't be major concessions by the CFL regarding rules. That's my own opinion. And that's one that's shared by a lot of people, I think. And that as someone, now this is the fan in me talking, and also someone who's been around and worked in the league, with the league a long time on their games as a reporter and, as I say, getting to host and play-by-play. I love the 3-down game. I grew up with it. I played it. I've watched it. And I love the NFL. I've been an NFL fan almost as long as a CFL fan. So I do like 4-down football. But I would hate to see the identity of the CFL. To me, there are certain things that give the CFL an identity. One is 3 downs, another the bigger field, and the Canadian content, the ratio. And I would be concerned if there was a merger. I'd be very concerned about all those things going by the wayside. And historically speaking, like, I'm a traditionalist and I'm a fan, and I'm in that demographic that remembers a better day for the Canadian Football League. And that part's hard. Now, that said, I don't have any money. I've made, you could say, because I've worked, a lot of my profession has involved coverage of the CFL, that, I've made some of my living. Part of my living has been made covering the league, as opposed to those businesses and owners who have invested and lost a lot of money. So sentiment doesn't pay the bills. I understand that. I really need to see where all of this is going before I would, offer a stronger opinion right now. But I could at least tell you that I'd be sad to see what to me is the identity of the Canadian Football League go. If that's what they have to do to survive, I would begrudgingly say I certainly do understand it. The money, the finances, the economics, it all matters. But really, it would be hard to think of it the way I've thought of the CFL in the past.
And that's interesting, Rod, because you and I have talked about how we've both been around the block a little bit and just fans of the Canadian Football League for so long. Other than the Edmonton Eskimos, you and I can probably look back on our half century on the planet and maybe 3.5, 4 decades of being fans. Every team, maybe with the exception of the Edmonton Eskimos at one point or another, has been in crisis. Right? Is that, am I remembering that the right way?
You know what? I could run them down here. Montreal folded from '87. They came back when the Alouettes returned to Montreal as a result of a failed experiment in the United States, the Baltimore Stallions. Ottawa Rough Riders folded after the 1996 season. My beloved Eastern Rough Riders folded.
Yep.
And they tried the Renegades. That failed in the early 2000s. And then the Red Blacks, it's been a resounding success up until, the pandemic. So Ottawa and Montreal as markets. The Argos have certainly had their share of financial crises, as David Braley helped. The late David Braley helped save the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and Bob Young as well later on. In fact, they had some severe problems. Saskatchewan, I know you had what? When was the telethon? And was that the late 80s, early 90s?
That was in the night. Yeah, that was in the 1990s. I do believe late 80s, early 90s. Yeah, and there was literally a time, and this showed how scary things were. One of the things that farmers were asked to do was bring their grain to the stadium. Like that's how, like a lot of people remember that, but that's how bad things were for the Saskatchewan Roughriders at one point in time, right? So that was the crisis that they had hit at a point in time as well. And
yet you're talking about the model franchise for the CFL now.
Yep, exactly.
And Ottawa, I could never have imagined Ottawa coming back the way they came back. And Montreal too, the Alouettes, it's been harder the last couple of years, but the Alouettes story with this team from Baltimore coming in, that was close to 20 years of tremendous success. It was really there. And so I've rhymed off, you're right, those teams that have been in distress or even folded, those cities that have lost teams, and yet they were reborn too. So I mean, to me that just shows that there's always hope. There always is, and no matter how big the crisis is, the CFL has overcome so much adversity over the years. I remember 1996 being so bleak. I was worried that the league was going to fold in 1996. I remember outgoing commissioner Larry Smith, who had tried. And I understand it. He tried the American experiment, putting teams in Sacramento and in Vegas and Shreveport, Louisiana, and Memphis, Tennessee, and Baltimore, San Antonio later, Birmingham. And this was done with design. There were financial reasons to wanting to grow, and it didn't work. And I thought everything after the '96 season, when the Ottawa Rough Riders, a franchise of over 100 years, folded. I was really concerned, and yet that's when TSN got on board more, started Friday Night Football. And as bad as things were for the CFL, I could never give up on the league because they have seen so many bad days and bounced back and had so many great days as well. That the league has certainly endured. And I don't, as I say, right now, because, I mean, we're talking about a global pandemic here.
That's right. Yep. I mean, and there's no playbook for something that comes around once every 100 years, right?
I don't know what to think. I keep hoping, as I say, I'm not a, financial side, economics. That's not my side of the street. So my hope has been all along that they could play again and they could eventually, it would take a few years, but get back to where they were. And so I don't know. As far as the XFL goes and Dwayne Johnson, I'll have to wait and see. We're all wondering what exactly this would entail. I know, I do believe, and I've been told, we're certainly at the earliest talking about a plan for either 22 or 2023.
Yeah. And I think you do have to look at the alternative, though. Can you see the CFL continuing without an XFL merger?
Once again, because, from what I've heard about the losses, that you're not talking about one franchise, you're talking about all franchises have lost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Whether it's to the tune of $6, $7, $8 million last year alone. And I do believe that obviously that they lost quite a bit through not playing, and they probably would have lost more by playing last year or without fans in the stands. So, I trust the fact that the league has lost a lot of money and is in a really difficult position right now? Yeah, I truly believe that. And I fear for the CFL's future without, things taking a turn soon. And I was hoping, if they could play again this year, that maybe they'd be able to turn things around financially. But I'm not privy to the bottom line here or how much each owner that has already lost money is willing to endure. I mean, how much more are they willing to endure? And I'm concerned, definitely. And I've been concerned about the league's future before, but I'm quite concerned about it now if they aren't able to play in 2021. Very concerned.
Well, the other thing too, so now what you need in the CFL and the commissioner's chair is an absolute leader, somebody who can say to Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and Calgary Sports and Entertainment, look, Austin Matthews' salary can cover the Argos payroll for 2 seasons, right? Johnny Gaudreau's yearly salary could cover the Stampeders payroll for 2 years as well. So now it kind of comes upon the commissioner to kind of rally the troops and get the big players involved and realize that, they can maybe come out of this, because without those 2 franchises with the deepest pockets, the community-owned teams are going to be okay. I think Bob Young has the passion for the league. We know the fans are in Ottawa, but those two in Calgary and Toronto, I guess that's kind of what it comes down to is, can you convince them to kind of pony up again when there's no guarantee that that's going to be a profitable endeavor for those 2 sports and entertainment groups?
Yeah, I really don't know the answer to that. And I understand what you're saying, and not to dodge the question. I just, as I say, because I don't, I'm not a financial guy, and I'm certainly no expert on that. The only thing I can see is that even wealthy people who could afford to lose more money don't want to lose more money.
Right.
I understand that. And they're in the business of, they're wealthy because they made sound investments. So, if it becomes, if it just means they're going to continue to lose, I mean, I can see them looking at this financial plan and either, wanting to change it or wanting to get out of it if it comes to that. I mean, that's happened before with the league. So it sounds to me, and this, I'll tell you, just my own belief too, but this isn't exactly an outrageous notion. I'm sure everybody is thinking this way. This isn't just Randy Ambrosie. I'm sure there has to be several owners who are also, I'm assuming, in favor of an idea of a partnership of sorts with the XFL, whatever that entails, for financial reasons, especially to grow the game, to survive. I mean, it's hard. As I say, it's hard to reconcile, because I don't want the game touched in terms of rules. I want things to stay the same. I just don't know how economically feasible that is right now, especially if they're looking at only a part of a season, or, heaven forbid, no season in 2021, which I think would be absolutely devastating.
And the other thing too, Rod, that I keep coming back to is, in the history of the NFL, I think they've had 3 commissioners, and the CFL is going through one every 4 years, right? And that's a little bit of a challenge too, right? That kind of shows you the complexity of dealing with a 9-team league where the needs of 9 owners are just so different, even though it's a small league. It would boggle the mind,
telling people now that there was a time when salaries were on an even footing, and in fact, some chose the CFL over the NFL because they could make more money. But I'm talking about the early 1960s, really since the 70s with television, when the NFL really took off. I mean, after they merged and through Pete Rozelle became a real TV power, and Paul Tagliabue built on that business model, and Roger Goodell's even taken it to levels I'm sure no one could imagine. But the biggest difference is money, number of people, number of viewers, but money. It's a much, obviously, I mean, wealthy league. And you talk about stability with commissioners. That's one big reason why Roger Goodell got a new deal with when he got his new contract with NFL owners. They were very happy with the amount of money he was making them. And that league is that's why they could afford to. Their television deal is so good, they could afford to play. They were still losing money from the standpoint they weren't making nearly as much as they did before, but that TV deal is so lucrative, they were able to play in 2020. A lot of leagues were able to make it a go because their TV deal could get by on that, and the CFL just can't get by on the deal with TSN alone. They need fans in the stands, and that dynamic makes it trickier, and it makes the job of being a commissioner a lot more stressful. I'm sure if you went back, if not ask Randy Ambrosie, and I'm sure it's a lot of stress for him, but Mark Cohan before, Tom Wright, Larry Smith, going way back, Doug Mitchell. I mean, it is a challenging job when the finances are a lot more difficult. And if you always have one team that's experiencing, some financial difficulty.
Rod, I'll ask you 2 more things here, and then I'll let Ray get in the last word. But earlier today, it was announced, speaking of the National Football League, the New York Jets traded Sam Darnold to the Carolina Panthers. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it seems like there potentially could be quite the quarterback carousel with the upcoming National Football League draft. And so just your thoughts on that. And secondly, what Grey Cup, out of all the Grey Cups you've covered, which one was your favorite to cover?
Well, the first of all, on Sam Darnold, those New York Jets, ever since they won Super Bowl III, Matt, with Joe Namath, people joke that they made a deal with the devil, that they would for that Super Bowl, and one of the greatest upsets in all football history, when the Jets beat the Colts back in January 1969. New York, well, the Giants have had a lot of success since, but the Jets have not. And they've been the butt of a lot of jokes and the butt fumble of a lot of jokes. And Mark Sanchez days, all these different quarterbacks, Sam Darnold. I don't know how high their expectations really were for him, but that clearly has not worked out. So we'll see when you look. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence is going to Jacksonville, but after that, there are Justin Fields and is it Mac Jones, and there are a few quarterbacks that are going to be available, and I'll be curious to see what path the Jets this time around take. But that's a tough market, especially the Jets, and I don't know. I don't. If you look at Buffalo in that division now, I can't believe the Patriots are going to stay down. I think Miami is going to be better. It's going to be tough for years for the Jets. That's just, unfortunately for them, they'll always have that Super Bowl win, but that's just kind of part of their identity, whoever ends up there. So, but as far as the one to cover, favorite one to cover.
Yeah.
Wow. There just have been, you know what? And this sounds like I'm sucking up to Rider fans. But I was actually in '89. I was doing sidelines and hourly reporting for CBC Radio. So I mean, that was obviously long before TSN covered the Grey Cups. It was still CBC right up until several years after that. I think 2007 was CBC's last, which was another Ryder Grey Cup victory over Winnipeg in Toronto. Yep. And in the same stadium, though, was Saskatchewan and Hamilton in 1989. And that was so memorable because it was so there were so many big plays. It was so dramatic. Ryder fans have a way of making it that much more memorable, too, just because of the passion. It had been 23 years since 66, the breakthrough, the first Grey Cup for the Saskatchewan Roughriders with Ron Lancaster and George Reed and that legendary team. But there'd been quite a drought for a long time. And then 89 comes along and the team was 9-9. Massive upset over one of the greatest teams in the regular season in history. And that's Tracy Ham and Edmonton in the West Final. And 9-9 Saskatchewan pulls off the upset, goes in. They're underdogs again against a very good Hamilton team. And there are just certain moments I remember about that. At one point, a 2-touchdown lead erased. I remember a catch by Tony Champion of the Tiger Cats, which was just brilliant. One of the greatest catches in Grey Cup history.
With cracked ribs.
Right.
What's that?
With cracked ribs.
With cracked ribs, yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
right.
Yeah.
To tie the game at 40.
That's right,
and then the drive. And one thing I remember, too, I had a cell phone, and we were on live on CBC Radio. We were on live, and I put the cell phone. I asked Bill Baker, who was the president of the CFL for 1 year. And the title was president. It wasn't commissioner. It was in effect commissioner. But they divided up the title between a president and chairman that 1 year in '89. And Bill Baker had built that Saskatchewan team. He was their general manager in '88 when they finally made the playoffs again. Or I don't know if they hosted a playoff game. It was the franchise was coming on in the late '80s. And here he is supposedly neutral. This former Saskatchewan Roughrider who basically built this team, and the next year after he's gone and becomes the president of the league, standing there as a dignitary and getting ready to present the Grey Cup. During the final drive or just before it, I think I got him on in one of our hourly sportscasts and gave him my phone. Basically, I asked the question into the phone and then gave it to him so he could give his answer. So there was kind of a crude way of conducting an interview, but still, I still remember that. And watching his reaction, if ever a commissioner of a league could be excused for being a little bit impartial or a little bit biased, thankfully there was nothing controversial, and I'm sure he would have been quite impartial in dealing with all of that, but he was wonderful. Bill Baker was great to deal with
for sure.
And he was so excited and Glenn Suter's a friend of mine and a colleague for years. We've called games together, and I've talked to him many times. And Sooners told the story many times with trying to settle Dave Ridgway down as I don't know if there was a timeout before the kick, robo kicker, the famous kick for the 43-40 victory. But there were so many Grey Cups that I've been to and that I've thoroughly enjoyed, but that has to be number one.
Nice.
You know what's an interesting story, Rod, is in 2013. So the Saskatchewan Roughriders, there's a lot of pressure on the team because they're hosting the Grey Cup, right? So they bring in G. Royce Simon, they bring in Anderson on defense, a lot of players, and there's a lot of pressure to win. And they do it at home.
Yeah.
And if you can believe this, Rod, I went to George Reed and I said, George, what do you think after the game in the President's Lounge? He said, Ray, we just saw the biggest game in Saskatchewan Roughriders history.
Wow.
And so think about that 2013 coming from George Reed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big statement coming from somebody that has seen as much as George Reed had.
Well, to think of the fan base, really the greatest, what emerged as just a wonderful, if you the team, but also the fan base, the fan passion, really part of the CFL identity is Saskatchewan. And for them to do it at home, the Argos had done it in 2012. BC Lions had done it in 2011. And I was at both of those games and they were great as well. I mean, in Toronto too, the fan passion for the Argos beating Calgary in 2012, the 100th Grey Cup was great, but there's just something special. And I say this as someone, as I say, I grew up an Ottawa football fan. Of the old Ottawa Roughriders, not a Saskatchewan Roughrider fan, but I've always had the admiration for the passion of the fan base, and I could see that. And unfortunately, that's the last. That was a year before I was CFL host, and for whatever reason, I didn't get to go to that Grey Cup. I wish I had. There's one and then maybe my answer would have been different to be able to. But that game, though, I mean, good for Saskatchewan. That game didn't have the drama because the Riders were so good that day. They just controlled Hamilton. I remember Corey Sheets. What was it, a fumble or a bobble?
Yep.
And he picked it up right away.
Early in the game, that ball sailed over Henry's head because he was the quarterback, and things just didn't go well for Hamilton. Yeah. And, the onslaught started, the 13th man's in on it. And you're right. That wasn't going to be a close game at that point because the Rider Nation smelled blood at that point. You were talking about earlier growing up. One of the great broadcasters who lives here in Saskatoon, who I talked to, and you'll love this, is Dale Isaac.
Oh, yeah.
Dale Isaac lives in Saskatoon, and of course, he's called so many great games of the day for CTV, especially the Western games. And I know you've got a great
Dale Isaac and Frank Rigney, I believe.
Absolutely,
that was the team on CTV West, and you had Pat Marsden and Mike Wadsworth in the East. But Dale Isaac called a great game. He was a great play-by-play guy.
Yeah,
and I worked with his brother Mal at CBC Radio back then. In fact, we worked. I believe I probably had Ty Cat's dressing room, and he would have had the Rider dressing room in '89.
Oh, there you go.
That's great. Absolutely, I do remember watching and listening to Dale Isaac call games.
Yeah,
this has been a fantastic history lesson for a young guy like myself, Rod and Ray. So
exactly.
Thank you to this both.
Stick around. Rod and I will show you the world, kid. Just stick around.
I'm sure you were, Rod.
One more thing that I just want to get to here before we get to, and it was a really dark day on March the 4th when we lost a great friend, and I know Chris Schultz was closer to you than me, and I just had to put up this picture from your Twitter feed that day. That's just that. Where is that? Where is that, Rod?
Tampa. As fate would have it, that is the Super Bowl in Tampa, Florida. Super Bowl 35. So 20 years ago. That was when the Ravens played the New York Giants, but that was the first of several Super Bowls of 9 or 10 that I worked with Chris Schultz, and I'd worked with him before. I knew Schultze, but that was the first time we worked on a longer assignment together, and I sent him that picture around the time during Super Bowl week in Tampa. 20 years later, I was in touch with him in late January, and I sent him that picture, and we joked about it. And he was doing well. I talked to him, the last time I talked to him was in late February, about 2 weeks before his passing, and he sounded great, very happy, and life was good, and it's just so tragic. But he was an interesting man because he could be what you saw, big and intimidating. He was, but to those, and I'm sure you knew this too, when you got to know him, He'd do anything for you, and he was he was like a teddy bear, and it was a lot of us, not just me, absolutely heartbroken and shocked by what happened. But boy, there's a guy that loved football, and I don't know what his opinion would be about this XFL possibility, because I think of him as someone who he loved the CFL, he loved the NFL, loved it. He loved four down football. I mean, he played for the Dallas Cowboys, played his college ball in Arizona, but he loved the CFL. He was very proud of his time in the CFL too. And that's the, not to tie in, obviously Chris's passing to whatever might be next for the Canadian Football League, but I've always felt there was room for both leagues and two different brands of the game. And I know he felt that way.
And that was one of the stories I was telling Matt a couple of weeks ago. So it was the 2003 Grey Cup. It was in Regina,
right,
and it was Edmonton, Montreal.
Yeah.
And so we had a corner. So CBC still doing the games. We had a corner warm end zone studio. And my favorite Chris Schultz story, halftime, it's Bryan Adams and Sam Roberts. They're the halftime show of the 2003 Grey Cup game. And Schultz, he takes a look around from where our studio is in the corner of the old Taylor Field, and he says, guys, there's no security. Let's go. We stood about from me to the camera away to watch Bryan Adams and Sam Roberts.
Yeah.
And I remember him throwing open the door and Dunnigan looking at me. Matt Dunnigan says, Ray, he's not kidding. He's gone. Like, we're going. So about 9 of us, like everybody in makeup, me, the sideline reporter, we all march out, stand in front of the stage, and walk back into our nice warm studio to watch the third and fourth quarter of that game. And he just loved life, right? And
yeah,
that was my favorite story of Chris Schultz.
Yeah, and by the way, I'd be feeling, if there had been security, I would feel sorry for the security guard that sees him coming, and he's bound and determined to. I would just treat him like a VIP.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Adams is expecting you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's great.
Well, Rod, thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have one more? Oh, I'm just gonna thank Rod for your time. Obviously, I know that you're super busy, so we appreciate you hopping on virtually here all the way from Ontario for us little guys here in Saskatchewan. So thanks so much.
Hey, Matt, thank you, and it's good to meet you this way. And congratulations, following the old men's footsteps. It sounds like you've made a great choice, and you keep it going. That's all the best to you in your career.
Appreciate that. Rod Smith from TSN joins us.
You're a good
from
man,
his home
right?
in Ontario.
I try. Thanks, buddy.
Big
Daddy, they call him. Yeah, you betcha.
So yeah, one of the best in the business.
Absolutely.
So
for sure.
Thanks so much for Rod Smith, and that pretty much wraps up our time. We went way over our limit today.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we normally wrap this up. I knew this was going to happen once him and I got talking.
We'll have to have Rod on again if he lets us have him on again. We'll have to have Rod Smith
for sure
on again. But thanks so much to Rod Smith. Thanks so much to you for watching or listening. And of course, at the start of the show, we said that we are going to give away a Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar gift certificate. And the winner of that is Joe Peterson. So make sure you get a hold of us, Joe, and we can get that Wendell Clark's Classic Grill and Bar gift certificate in your hands. We will do this all again next week. Wray Morrison can't talk, but he's waving goodbye. Until then, stay safe.